And so I met this guy, Ed Brubaker. And so we're at the Winter Soldier premiere, and lo and behold, Ed Brubaker's right in front of us. And so we're waiting in the line, and we're talking to Ed. So exciting that that he created this character at Marvel, Winter Soldier, and it's like the heart and soul of this movie. It's super cool. He's super excited. We're super excited to be there. It's so great to see Ed and success, and you know, and we're getting up to the desk where if you're like the copy boy at Disney, you get sent to the Grauman's, the overflow theater where, so you get to be at the premiere, but you're not at the premiere, and then there's the other line where you're walking at the red carpet and you're, walking behind Jeremy Renner and Scarlett Johansson and all that going in to the theater where all the stars are. And so we get up there, Ed's in front of us, and Ed gets pointed to the overflow theater, and David and I get pointed to the El Capitan. And that was probably one of my most, probably one of the most horrible, like, yeah, I mean, it's just horrible. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible to see Ed treated in such a way. It was horrible to be there. It was horrible to see his facial expressions. Like here were two guys. We'd done a business deal with Marvel, and we were getting treated better than the creator. And so that was kind of David and I's North Star when we talked about distillery. We
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, the weekly podcast where we get to know the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry to learn the tips that might make your career or business in comics that much healthier. This week, our guest is Chip Mosher. And now, don't let all the fancy titles fool you. Chip is a storyteller. His lifetime misspent in the world of comics has brought us all some of the best comics produced and more ideas and passion in the marketing of comics than perhaps anyone else working today. Chip has been all around this industry, and we cover so much in this interview that the transcript alone would make a wonderful history of comics. I do hope you listen all the way to the end, because we do get to some stuff about distillery that I really think lots more people should hear. All right, friends and neighbors, my friend, Chip Mosher.
So, as I will be mentioning in the intro, you and I have known each other for, I don't know, decades, probably. I think we've been, ever since I remember going to conventions, I remember kind of seeing your face and seeing you around. Yeah. And looking over the timeline of your career, it's, it pretty well cycles against mine. I mean, you really have been all over the place, but I wanted to start I want to start a little earlier than that. So you and I both grew up in the great state of Texas.
Yep.
You've gone from being a Texan to a Guelphin, Guelphite.
Guelphite. Guelphite. It sounds like graphite. Like
it does.
Something that I'm gonna sharpen and draw with.
Or is that a Guelphite crystal? Because I hear those have very healing powers. Yeah, you wear that and it wards off cancers. Yeah. All right. So you start off in Texas. Tell me about your family. I don't think I know anything about them.
Oh, geez. Me neither.
Hence living in Canada.
How much time do you have? Because when I'm not reading comics, my hobby is genealogy. So,
is it really?
Yeah.
Really?
So I grew up in Houston, Texas.
I'm sorry.
And grew up in safe Republican Spring Branch in Houston. Went to St. Francis Episcopal Junior High, most notably Most notably, Wes Anderson also went to school there
Wow.
several years before me. I have real problems watching the Royal Tenenbaums because that is basically about my neighborhood in Texas, but translated to Brooklyn. Um,
Really?
yeah, yeah, I really that movie gives me the heebie-jeebies. Um, so if you can imagine Royal Tenenbaums, but in suburban, uh, uh, sort of wealthy suburb of Houston, yeah, that's pretty much the childhood.
Amazing. All
You know,
right.
but like for some reason, I still haven't quite figured this out. Like in 1970, the two biggest comic book conventions in the United States were San Diego and, oh God, I'm going to turn that off, and Houston, Texas.
And what
And
was it in Houston, Texas? What was it?
yeah, it was the other biggest
Okay.
show in the States. And so Houston's always been a big comic book town. Buddy Saunders is well known. Lone Star Comics fandom, letters in the back, Fantastic Four,
Sure.
uh, Dallas. But
But he's from
there's
Dallas. Yeah, that's where I grew up.
not
Right.
a lot. There's not a lot of like stuff about Texas, about Houston, Texas. But it's a huge comic book town. When I started collecting and reading comics in the mid '80s. Um, I think I could probably rattle off 35 comic shops off the top of my head. I mean, it's a
Jesus.
huge amount of shops. And there was a Capital City warehouse that I later worked in during college that was by Astroworld, um, which now people think is a concert where horrible things happen instead of like an amusement park. And so,
I have a story about Astroworld. Before I started working in comics, I worked for a company that did old time photos in amusement parks. And I was sent all over the country to work in these old time photo studios.
yeah,
And the worst experience, capital W worst experience, in fact, I vowed to never go back there without a substantial paycheck, was in Houston, Texas at Astroworld. There was an attempted mugging in the employee parking lot, which
yeah,
I beat the crap out of the guy. It happened because I was so angry that he was attempting this, and I was tired, and I was like, "This, I'm never coming back here. This place is horrible."
yeah. Well, I mean the thing to do in the '80s was get a season pass for the summer and go down there and you know just run around and stuff. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. I don't want to feel like old man on Facebook with memes about like Gen X childhood, but
Oh yeah,
I mean it's great. Get on your bike, bye mom, bye dad. You wouldn't come home. You'd leave at
no,
10 a.m. You'd ride around, come home at 6. I mean it was crazy. I mean the fandom at in Houston was really intense for comics. I made lifelong friendships. I was just texting, one of my oldest friends today who still also works in publishing. I mean, it was just, it was great. And, we had a whole group of guys and it was mostly guys back then that loved comics. We all started working in comic shops, and then we started going to San Diego Comic Con in high school, uh,
wow,
which was insane. I mean, it was insane. So the first Comic Con I went to was in 1989 when it was at the Civic Center. So my good friend David Rutledge, uh, who still sells comics on eBay out of his apartment in Houston. He was a little older than me. Convinced my stepmom, and my parents that she was the one most on the fence. It'd be okay for for me to get on a Greyhound bus and take a Greyhound bus from Houston to San
To
Diego.
San Diego.
Oh yeah, yeah, 2.5 days. And there was another guy on that bus, Joe Nosmak, who I met at the comic shop when I was like 11. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so we had 11 guys in a Holiday Inn hotel room, two people on the balcony, one guy in the bathtub. We all kicked in, I think, $10 a night.
Nice.
It was yeah, it was fantastic.
You were on the floor, I assume, because you were the.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I was 16, so it was great. Nosmak had gone the year before, um, and then yeah, I mean that it was Houston was it was I I I like and appreciate Houston now. There's a lot of fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
I think the city is a little too widespread out, too many freeways. There's more miles of freeway in Houston than there are in Los Angeles, which a lot of people don't realize. It's super spread out. But back in the '80s, as a teenager, there really wasn't anything to do
Yeah.
other than getting into trouble, and there wasn't a place. No one I knew, like kids these days, they want to stay at home and hang out and be on their phones and they love their parents. And,
Yeah.
back in the 80s, you got your license and you were gone. And we would hit like every book stop in Houston on like Friday or Saturday night, and just look for the weird magazines because they all had different magazines. I forgot what the magazine distributor was, but one of the guys who's at Dark Horse worked there. They were out of Austin. They had all these weird magazines at Bookstop. But yeah, I mean,
And that was your Friday night. You and a bunch of buddies.
and then we'd hang out at the comic book shop. I think New Comic Book Day was Thursday back in the 80s, and
I think so.
so we'd all hang out at the shop and talk and we had Dr. Dan, who was a dentist, who was a character. I worked at this comic shop called Phoenix Comics and Games, Gessner and Hammerly, and that was a bike ride from my house, and a woman named Cecilia Pierce had bought that, and she was dating at the time a guy, John Carbonero, who had JC,
Whoa.
who did Thunder Agents, and John was in Houston at the time, and they broke up, and he sold a share, and then Cecilia met Jeremy Shore, and they got married, and then they moved to Dallas, and they started tight.
Holy crap! Really?
So I've known Jeremy Shore. I knew Jeremy's wife Cecilia before. They knew each other. But Jeremy was my boss when I was 14,
Really?
and I'm still here. I'm still here.
You survived it. You survived the tale.
So
Oh, that's wonderful.
they have a great store in Dallas, Texas.
Yes, they
and
do.
she was, she was fantastic. She was like everyone's second mom
Yeah.
in that neighborhood. It was a great place. And then, oddly enough, I mean, I don't know what was in the water. Joe went on to create Oni Press. I have a longer story about that we can get into later that ties in San Diego. But my other friend, Dagan James, who I met, at the conventions there and at Phoenix, he's doing he's got into, we were all huge Cerebus fans,
Oh
for
yeah.
for good or for bad. Back then, Cerebus was hadn't really jumped the shark. It was
Right.
it
Yeah.
was uh,
Dave Sim
it,
was just a little wacky in a good way.
a
You
little
know,
wacky in a good way.
which you
Around
kind of have to be to produce at that rate. You know?
right. and so we're all sort of inspired by him. There was a local guy, John Nordland, who had this comic book company called Blackbird Comics. He was doing this comic book called Heroes, which is black and white, that we all hung out with. And Martin Thomas, who was doing stuff with him, who now has a movie review show called Double Toasted. Yeah, just a great bunch of guys. Dagan got into self-publishing and doing a magazine in New York called Lid, and then he's done all these photography books, and he sent them to Dave Sim, and Dave was like, "Oh, I want you to do my stuff." So one of my other childhood friends does a bunch of like high-end hardcover remastered Cerebuses with book slipcases that you can find on Kickstarter. So
Whoa.
so like of my teenage peer group, three of us are, I mean, Joe's kind of retired, I guess, from Oni, but yeah, three of us, went into publishing,
That
which
is crazy.
is very weird, but
That that's
cool.
incredible. What do you? I mean, is that like a chicken and the egg thing? Were you guys like essentially training each other for that? How do you
I
square that?
I mean, I think we're all just kind of weird, geeky kids, that didn't, it's funny. Like I mean, I had friends in high school. But like my peer group, like, like most of my friends went to other high schools in Houston. We met at comic shops. This guy, Larry Taylor, who passed away several years ago, and his wife, Lori Taylor, um, they had met at U of H in this like the sci-fi club or something, and they loved comics. And there was a great comic book convention almost every quarter in Houston, and they'd bring people like Spain Rodriguez, Bern Hogarth, Doug Wildey, Gary Groth, Bill Willingham, who was local in Houston for the time, and who else? Jaime Hernandez, Gilbert Hernandez, Daniel Close. I mean, and so like I got exposed to all these. I'd see the guests. I was like, oh, I got to get my comic signed. So like, I'm gonna buy Lloyd Llewellyn.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great comic book for a 12-year-old to read. And so I mean, we're all like kind of precocious, well-read comic book geeks that were sort of on the artsy side of stuff. And there wasn't like what I was getting at about Houston. There was nothing to do.
Right.
There was nothing to do. I mean, it wasn't quite in the country where you could go cow tipping, but it's like the time that still is like the fourth largest city in America, but there's just in the 80s there's just nothing to do. And it's so
Yeah.
hot and humid. You go to your air conditioned car, to your air conditioned house, and then to the air conditioned mall. I got pulled over one time for walking around at night. And I was like, the cop was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just walking." It's like, "It's too hot to walk." I'm like, "Oh, no one's walking. It's too hot to walk." I'm like, okay.
I used to know guys.
But
There's a loop. There's a loop freeway that goes around Fort Worth, and used to know guys who would just get high and just do that loop. They would just drive that
yeah,
loop over and over again.
610 loop in Houston is like
Yeah.
that's what when we got really bored.
Yeah.
That's when you did the loop. You know. So it's like you watch TV. But like so, there are this convention scene. You know, Nosmack and his friend Joe Gardner. Joe was at Rice University. Nosmack was in high school. They were friendly, and Gardner needed help with the Japanese animation club at Rice, which was really active, and the ADV guys took over after they left and created ADV out of it, which was one of the first like anime. Yeah, we were getting like I saw Akira like a couple of years after it came out on a dub VHS, not a dub
Right.
VHS, on a VHS without
Like
any
a
dub.
pirated VHS. Yeah.
Yeah, we would go to this Japanese grocery store and get all these pirated,
Oh yeah.
what you'd call Japanimation, which sounds
Yeah.
so horrible now. Um, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, just the scene. It was a great scene. It was fantastic.
It's
You
hard
know,
really to communicate how like kind of special you felt like when you. I remember discovering Hong Kong action flicks that were just on because they were on this like dub of a dub of a dub VHS tape that a buddy had, 20 of them, and it was just like you found this magical trove. It's just incredible. Yeah,
yeah,
it's hard to communicate that in today's terms.
yeah. But I mean, we all liked. We were big. Alternative rock, college rock. Left of the dial. You
Sure.
know, music listening kids. We'd go to the clubs, and Houston is in Texas, conservative, fairly corporate. So you'd go to these clubs downtown as a teenager and see these bands, and you'd see the same 400 kids. It just wasn't a lot. Wasn't a lot of kids that were into that, and so it was fun. You go see Jane's Addiction for $6.
Yeah. Not
Oh, and
bad. I could see
you
that.
know, you know, hang out at the punk clubs when we were a little older, but not old enough.
Of course not. No.
Yeah,
Well, the punk clubs, I don't know. The those hardcore kids, man, they knew scenes early. They really did.
yeah.
Tell me about. I have a music thing here. This just came up in our research. It may be a thing. It may be not a thing. Did your dad book Willie Nelson in?
Yeah, he said he did. You know,
Okay.
whether whether that's true, I have uh, so my dad went to UT, and he was at he was in a fraternity, Sigma something,
Yeah.
and they would book Willie Nelson to play the fraternity before Willie was a big breakout hit. But yeah, yeah, my dad was a character. He's a character. So I don't know if it's true. He also told me that he was there when the Whitman shooting happened, and he thought a car was backfiring, and then when he passed away last year, and I was writing his obit, I was like, but he was at NYU when this happened. Like maybe he was visiting. I could never tell. I think I left it in his obit because he told that story 100 times. Told to Willie Nelson, he's like, when he had long hair and the girls loved it. That's what he'd say. So
That is it. It is. I did the same a couple years ago. You and I have both written a lot of copy over the years. It's very strange writing your dad's obit.
he oh my God, he's such a character. Um, he and the long story, he was like got into some legal. He was a lawyer. He was a lawyer who got into some legal problems. Uh, he got his undergraduate degree in accounting, didn't pay his taxes. Um, you know, type of guy, and then he was trying to get out of it, and the lawyer told him to write a psychological biography. So like 78, he wrote this like 40-page bio, and so I used that to write his obit. It was fun.
You got to
You know,
got to crib the old man's notes. It's great. It's
yeah, I mean, it
amazing.
was funny because he was a conservative kind of libertarian leaning right winger,
Hmm.
and he always had. He went to graduated law school at UT, and then he went to NYU to get a master's in law, tax law. Got a master's in tax law. Got on the wrong side of the IRS because the guy thought. Uh, but no one who doesn't want to teach gets a master's in tax law. And he had no interest in teaching, and it was 1966. And I always like I always thought in my back of my head, I never had the stones to ask him. I was like, you had a low draft number. You had a low draft, and in his bio, he was like, to avoid the draft. I was like, I knew it. I knew it, but it's in the '80s in Texas that's not going to fly anymore. So
Uh-uh. Uh-uh.
you know,
No, you either joined or you had to have a real good reason why you didn't. Yeah.
But my other genealogy is not related by blood, but my grandfather's brother, so my great uncle, I guess that's great uncle. His wife is the aunt of Billy Gibbons. So Billy Gibbons is a cousin by marriage.
It's a cousin, a nothing-in-law. So
Yeah, nothing. You know, that's that's my big Texas music connection.
So
My
where did you? So you're working in comic shops.
Yeah.
You're working in comic shops. You're working in a warehouse.
Campus House worked for Milton Greet back in 1992.
Yeah, I guess you would have.
Didn't know Milton,
You never met him back
but
then.
he was the boss.
Yeah.
I knew his name.
It's somebody had to sign the paychecks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, most stores in Houston were serviced by Capital City. They were all Capital City stores.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, yeah, yeah. You know,
Gotcha.
got the eternal correspondence and
That's right. Right. Yes.
Oh.
The ICV1, if you will.
ICV1. Yeah.
That's correct. All right. So you're working in the shops. I feel like I kind of, you and I kind of bonded when we started talking about, like, originally your pre-Oni publishing days, your pre-Oni. Can we talk just a little bit about those? Because there's one particular, and I think you know which one it is. There's one particular marketing stunt.
This is really great before all the school shootings. Now I don't talk about this anymore. In the
One more time. One more time.
1998, the bloom started getting off the rose with the story. But go ahead.
Yes. So at some point you meet Shannon Wheeler, right?
I met Shannon Wheeler in 1990 when I was 17 at the Dallas Fantasy Fair. He had a booth next to he was next to Al Williamson. I got an Al Williamson sketch for $20 that I still have.
Right on. You still have it.
Still have it.
That's awesome. The first episode that we recorded, I was asking the owner, Mark Bowker, what the surprise products have done well for him, and he said that Shannon's new book, I can't remember the name of it, something about Conversations with God or something like that, is far and away a bestseller for them. I can totally see it.
As God is disappointed in you?
God is disappointed in you. That's it. Yeah.
That's the one Shannon and Mark Russell did.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get connected with Shannon.
Yeah.
And how do you two start conniving together? Like, what is that? How's that start?
Well, Shannon's about 4 or 5 years older than me, right? So I could give you the short version, but I'll give you the long version because the long version's more interesting.
Cool.
So Shannon lived in Austin, Texas. So Martin Thomas, who colored the Steve Pugh Young Grimjacks in the back of Grimjack, colored Crying Freeman, was one of the guys in the scene in Houston. He also worked with John Nordland, Blackbird Comics, which was out of Austin. Did this book called Heroes, and Mark did the stuff at the back. Super nice guy, really friendly, and Martin Nosmak and the gang in Houston, we'd all hang out at the shows, the conventions all the time. And Mark moved up to Austin, and then of course got connected with Wheeler. Wheeler had done this strip at he went to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and did this strip called Running with Scissors. And so, back in the day, if you wanted to become a strip cartoonist, you wanted your strip to be at the Daily Texan at UT because Berkeley Breath had came out of there, et cetera, et cetera. So Shannon moves to Austin. I think Chris Ware had just finished Floyd Farland at in the Daily Texan. Shannon has this. I think Shannon met him like once in Austin. Has this funny story because Chris left a couple of strips, and 15 years later, Shannon was like, I still have those. They're framed. in my house. And Chris was like, "No, keep them. I'm glad someone got them." Yeah, so this guy Corey Coleman was doing a strip. Robert Rodriguez, who's a famous filmmaker now, was doing a strip. Um, there's the whole group of cartoonists in Austin. Sam Hurt was sort of the older, more wise cartoonist. He was doing I-Beam, that was still running in the local paper, and so yeah, so there was a whole scene up there, and when I went to Dallas Fantasy Fair in high school, Martin called me up. He was like, "Oh, my friend Shannon's going to be there. You should hang out with him." So I met Shannon when I was still in high school. Uh, Shannon started going to San Diego too, I think that next year. So I went to San Diego 89, 90, 91, 92. I think I missed 93, 94, you know. Uh, so, uh, so
I
yeah,
think
so,
94 was my first year, I think.
yeah,
I think.
yeah. I mean, the first year I went to there in 89, it was at the Civic Center. There were 10,000 attendees.
Jeez.
1990, we had the walkthrough of the convention center. I bumped into Jack Kirby. That was fun. Got to talk to Jack. Um, so anyway, so then I go to college. I'm up in Austin. Shannon's working at this video store that his aunt runs, Vulcan Video, and there's Charlie's in the back, Fat Charlie, who's fixing videotapes, and Fat Charlie was what Fat Freddy was based off of, Fabulous Furry Freak
Oh
Brothers.
yeah.
Vulcan Video was named after the Vulcan Gas Company that Shannon's aunt took the name because Shannon's uncle, Houston, used to do the lights, the Vulcan Gas Company, and Gilbert Shelton did the posters. And so this is my 6 degrees separation of comics. And
Yeah. Everything leads back. Yeah.
yeah, and so then Shannon had come to Texas every summer, spent time with his aunt and uncle, and then he's cartooning all the time, and then he's at UC Berkeley, and he's going off to Paris for a vacation, to for the first time, and his uncle used to go, "Can you give these pictures? Can you deliver these to my friend Gilbert?" And Shannon's like, yeah, Gilbert Shelton, Gilbert Shelton, and it's like, yeah, I've known him since I was your age. It's like, oh, you've known that I'm a cartoonist. You've never mentioned this before. So that's a funny story. So Vulcan Gas Company was a big um, club in the 60s. Janis Joplin played there and stuff. So Vulcan Video was like the video store. And so Shannon worked there. He got me a job there while I was still in college. And then in college, he and Martin and a bunch of the other cartoonists started Adhesive Comics. And I was still in college. So, it was all out of Shannon's house that was in Austin, like, right around 6th and Lamar, and it was a great little scene. They just started publishing comics under Adhesive Comics, and I was just sort of the 20-year-old snot-nosed kid hanging around, helping out. you know.
And at some point, this is where I can become aware of anything that you have touched and we're going to tell the story. I'm sorry, you got to tell it one more time.
That's fine.
There was a period, the black and white boom of the late '80s. Like it was huge. It was undeniable, and it was well before the big like glossy boom of the early '90s. There was this one book that we kept getting at the comic shop because I started working at that comic shop around '94, '93, around there.
Yep.
And this book had an actual bullet hole in it. Yep. So, I mean, it could have just been like somebody with an ice pick would poke a hole in it, but it was an actual bullet hole.
have a copy. I think I have the copy somewhere, but I
Do
think
you?
it's yeah. Yeah, we went out. I think they shot it. Shannon shot it over 3 days. I think I did the last day, uh, and we shot the whole print run with a 22. And the art, um, there's the on the cover the guy's holding the comic book and says it's not mint,
That's
and
right.
bullet hole goes through that, and there's a bullet hole, there's a something being hit by a bullet motif throughout the whole comic, except for Ted Nafe's story because he just forgot. And so we razzed Ted Nafe. And if you know Ted, that just tracks, right?
Yeah, I
And
bet
so
Ted.
it was
Yeah.
funny, like meeting Ted for the first time. Oops, let me do it.
You're a little out of focus there.
There we
Just
go.
sit still. It'll catch you. There you go.
So Ted, yeah, yeah, Ted later did Courtney Crumman for Oni
Yeah.
Press. So that was great.
Yeah.
Well, let's skip to Oni. So uh, Joe decides to.
How? I mean, Joe is the founder, I guess, of Oni Press, right?
Yeah, with
Which,
Bob Track. Yeah.
yeah. And then you were there at the beginning. Were you?
Yeah,
What is that story like?
I mean,
How'd that go?
kind of, sort of. I mean, Joe was always hustling. Had a great mind for business. He got me a job at the Capital City warehouse. He was in the front, like doing the books, helping do the books, and do the ordering and stuff.
Right.
Uh, at the con, once I left Phoenix, Joe was working out in Katy, Texas, at a bookstore called Musabel's Books, and he was the buyer. And so I started clerking there, uh, and um, and so yeah, and then he was like, I think he was the buyer of the local record store, Cactus, which is still around in Houston, famous independent record store. And so anyway, in '89, how Joe and I bumped into each other at, I believe, Herb Halverson's Silver Penny at the comic shop at the Mini Maxi Mall on I-10 and Gessner, I-10 and Beltway. It's called West Belt back then. And he was like, you have to pick up. We started talking somehow. It's like, you have to pick up this comic book called Mage.
Oh
It's great.
yeah.
Mage is
Oh,
great. And so
so
then
good.
I picked up Mage 14, and I remember Herb didn't have it, and so I went to Phoenix. I mean, these stores were like probably like 2 miles apart, right? And then there were like two other stores in this flea market. It was amazing. Um, and so yeah, and so then we struck up a friendship, but we are like huge Kamiko fans, and I think one of the sadder, and Ross at Boom and I used to talk about this, about how impactful Kamiko
Oh,
was to like Dark Horse and Oni and Boom and I realized at Distillery, where Steinberger, the co-founder of Distillery with me, huge Mage fan, and Kamiko fan, and I forgot that Kamiko did just solely wraparound covers for all their books, and I was like, oh, this tracks.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but we were, so Joe and I, like, I don't think there was a Kamiko book that I didn't try, that I didn't buy. I mean,
yeah,
Willingham was in town. He was doing Elementals.
yeah.
Bought Elementals, which was fantastic.
Such a
Um,
beautiful book.
Mage was great. Grendel was great. Then they
I
started,
loved Grendel.
their licensed books were great. Macross, the Robotech stuff. I don't know if it's our Dave Johnson that drew some of those early Robotechs, but I was looking through them. Was that Todd McDevitt's warehouse after
Yeah,
Comics Pro, and
yeah.
I found a whole bunch of Robotechs, and I was like, who drew these? So like, Dave Johnson, is that our Dave Johnson? I gotta I gotta ask Dave about that. But
Quick question before we leave it too far. Todd's warehouse. Is it a sign of genius or madness?
Both.
Because I can't decide. It's
Both.
it's both. Yeah,
He's a mad genius.
truly, truly is. It's both terrifying and just like it is awestruck and awful at the same time. It's just full of awe.
In some photos, cut in.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, as a kid, everyone loved Johnny Quest. Like
Oh
cartoon.
sure.
And then all of a sudden, Kimiko's doing a Johnny Quest comic with like Doug Wildey, who created the cartoon. And then I mean, they were just doing such cool stuff. And so, and then like Shrek's riding the like the Kamiko blimp interior stuff, and Diana's like editing all the books. And so, when Joe and I hit San Diego in '89, I mean, the first booth we went to was the Kamiko booth, right? And so
Of course.
I'm 16, Joe's 17, and and we're just like super precocious, fanboys. And this is a thing about San Diego, which was amazing back then, was Wednesday was retailer night. Wasn't
remember.
pre- it was retailer night. And so we were retailers. So we signed up, to get into, we wanted to get in. We were reading, Comics Buyer's Guide. We were reading Amazing Heroes. And like we wanted to know what was going on. And so, and I can only imagine what it was like making comics back then, because like everything was FedExed. You'd finish drawing the issue and you'd FedEx it to the inker, and the inker would do it in the FedEx, and you'd pray to God that it didn't get lost in FedEx. And then, the colorist would get it last, and they had 4 days to color the book, Just that hasn't changed.
That's not changed at all.
Changed at all. But so you'd go to the retailer night, and these publishers would have Xeroxes of books that weren't coming out for months. People were working months ahead. How did they manage cash flow? Who knows? And so it was just fantastic. So we just made a beeline for Kimiko, and then we just started grilling, because we were like comics and music. So we're like, what kind of music do you listen to? Like, we want to know what bands you like. And like Shrek and Diana were like, whoa, who are these kids?
Can you imagine meeting you, like that 16, 17-year-old kid who like knows all this indie press, is like got decent taste in me. I'm falling in love with these kids. I can't imagine them coming to me at a show,
I mean, we had a whole, we had a group. It wasn't just Joe and I. There were like 5, 6 other guys. And so and we were all like, we didn't read. We're like 16, but like we had passed Marvel, and we still read Marvel and DC books, but we were like way more into indie books. And so, we're talking to Bob Diana, and then like, we're just hanging around the booth the rest of the time. And then Bob Diana is like, do you guys want to go to Julia Schwartz's 70th birthday party? And I'm like, yes, we do.
Yes, I do.
So, so then the next thing I know, like we're at Julia Schwartz's 70th birthday party. Mark Hamill's in the corner. I mean, it was nuts. It was nuts. It was great, and so anyway, like we all became friends. And then, 8 years after that, Joe moved up to Portland, and he and Bob started owning press. And then a couple of years later, Hollywood started sniffing around. I was in Austin and gone to film school, and thought I knew what I was doing, and Joe, Bob Chapman, and myself created what eventually was known as Oni Entertainment. But initially, we stole Bob's toy line name, called it Big Blast Entertainment. So it was like a little remote.
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember those toys. Yeah.
So I like Big Blast. Is a great name.
That's a great name. Yeah. That's well, it's amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
fun. So then, then I moved to Los Angeles, and then, I was, moving sand around on the beach, taking meetings and trying to set things up. And,
Yeah.
it was a little too early, a
Yeah.
little too early,
You
but
think?
I was working in special effects at the time, and, I
Okay.
could run off. I was producing motion capture. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, which it was not a thing to do for job security. Um, but yeah, so then I'd run off and take meetings, and you know, and then eventually I was like, oh, I can't. I got to do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the something else?
I you know I decided that I was gonna write comics.
I was gonna ask because it's I'm seeing you've done one of the things I've always loved about talking with you is that you and I have very similar interests in the business side of things. But I mean, I see film
Yeah.
school. I see a lot of the people that you're friendly with or writing and creating. Like what that has. I mean, you've done some writing, obviously,
Yep.
but that has not been really the focus of your career.
No. I mean, and so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna write. And so I had like at different times in my career had worked at it was a big. I got introduced to Mac computers in college. There was a
Yeah.
Mac. The only like at film school at UT. If you took an editing class, you were cutting 16 millimeter film with a razor blade. And I was at UT, and I was like, this is garbage. And so I was like, how am I going to learn how to edit on a computer? And so this woman, Sandy Stone, who who's helped create MIDI and had been Jimi Hendrix's sound engineer, and who was just this, sort of multi hyphenate music producer, computer guru, worked at Atari Labs, done all this stuff, had this ACT Lab, Advanced Communication Technology Lab. And so I just gravitated towards that during film school, and learned all about, how to edit on Macs and use After Effects before it was owned by Adobe and all that crap. And and then one of the special effects places I was working for around 9/11, the market bottomed out, um, and they like cut everyone's pay, and I was like, oh, so I just cold called some computer stores, and it was like, hey, you need anyone part time? And so like I was working at this special effects shop, and I'd go on they needed some coverage during lunch, so I'd go to this computer store called Mac Enthusiast, which was by the Fox lot, and and work from 11 to 2. I'd just do the lunch shift,
So you
make some
work in
extra,
retail. Yeah.
make some extra cheddar,
Yeah.
and which is fun because like Ray Manzarek would come in, and I'd get to talk to him, and Wesley Crusher's mom would come in, and I mean I have stories for days about you know about that. And then so then I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on my writing. So I applied to the Apple Store, and I was like, okay, I'll work at the Apple Store, and I'll have Tuesdays and Thursdays off. No one I know has Tuesdays and Thursdays off, so I'll write.
Yeah.
I worked at the I was part of the uh NSOT, new store opening team. The Apple Store Century City helped. Well, it was actually probably like the best career move I could have made. Um,
Really?
like they did like 2 weeks of training for that, which it was a little culty, but it was really great. Did a bunch of like role playing customer experience skills. But one of the things that they talked about a lot is like with every customer interaction, you really just have to assume positive intent. And they did this whole thing on assuming positive intent, which sounds like super hippy dippy, but it was a real, to a semi angry 20, I was one of the oldest people there working at the Apple store in 2005. So what was I? I was like 32. Was I
Man.
32? Yeah, I was 32. Yeah, 32 at the Apple store, oldest person there. Um, it was really, I haven't been like kind of a punk, and it was like, oh, and that really really helped change my perspective. The corporate training was fantastic, helped like kind of button me up. And then I realized that I could write, but I was really slow. I was like the slowest writer I knew. And I was like, this is not, I'm never, so after a year or so, and I'd written like 5 issues, and I was like, yeah, never gonna make it in comics. Never making it in comics.
No.
Just wanted to
Yeah.
write what I wanted to write. I really had no interest in writing, anything. But yeah, the Apple Store. I went on, worked at the Grove for a year. I was running. They had this thing called business consultant position where you were dealing with like the high end stuff, and so like the producer of Melrose Place would come in and he'd be like, "Okay, we're gonna give iPods to the whole cast and crew. I need 350 iPods." And I was like, 350 iPods at 400 pop, that's a lot of cheddar.
Yeah.
Uh, and then have to deal with that, and like, oh, okay, we can pay you with a cashier's check. No, we don't take cashier's check. Oh, how do we get this done? Stuff like that. And then I'd get a call. It's like, oh, hey, Chip, thanks for having the iPods delivered before we paid. And I'm like, oh, so they drop shipped like 400 iPods to the Melrose Place, um, without getting paid. Thank God they paid. That was nice.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Hey,
know,
Chip, where's our $20,000, Chip? Where is it?
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. And so, but that place is great. There's a retirement community around Century City. And so and this is before the iPhone came out. So you just talk to customers, talk about computers, and I love to talk, obviously, because I've talked way more than you. And
It's an interview. This is the time. This is what I'm supposed to shut up.
yeah, and so like I knew people that worked with Howard Hughes. I think I met two of Howard Hughes's old engineers that were like 80-year-old retirees. Um, you know, my favorite story was, I was dealing with this crotchety old guy, and they just transferred from the PowerPC to the Intel chip, and the stuff was still like in emulation, not working well, and they were like, here's how you talk to people about all these really bad problems that we're having with the emulation, and it was like, thanks, Apple. Uh, so I was talking to this guy, and it was like this older guy, and he was like super crotchety, and I was like I was being nice, and he was like really digging into me and digging into me, and finally I snapped at him, and he was like, "Kid, don't snap at me. I directed your favorite film as a child." And I was like, "Oh, so you directed, Charlie and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?" He's like, "Yes, I did." I'm like, "You're Mel Stewart?" He's like, "Yes, I am." I'm like, "Okay, Mel, you can be a dick." And so yeah, uh, uh, let's see,
That's excellent.
yeah, but then so I
Screen
gave him,
grab the number, kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
I gave him a phone number, and he's like, "Chip, I'm having problems." I'm like, "Sure, I'll help you. I'll help Mel Stewart."
Oh,
Favorite movie as a kid,
that's
and
awesome.
and then Grove. I was at the Grove when the iPhone came out, and that was a pretty big night. We got in trouble. We we weren't supposed to let people get in the line twice, and we let Seal get in the line twice and got in trouble. Uh, so my LA retail stories.
It
Um,
sounds it sounds like though that was like that was um a very influential period for you, right?
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
assume positive intent. I mean, I'm probably gonna write that somewhere on a
Yeah, I mean
yeah
that just like that one concept, because I did, as like a 20-year-old, early 30-year-old, you'd have like interactions with people, like, oh, they're out to get me,
yeah
It's like, no, they're not out to get you. They're just, very few people are out to get you. You know, you have to, assume, when the customer's angry at you, assume that this person's just, they're freaking frustrated, and
yeah.
so I one of the great things about working at the Apple Store for 2 years was like there was a lot of churn in the hiring, and so after a couple of churnouts, you'd be one of the old timers who'd been there for 6 months, um, and you're like, oh, we got a whole new group of staff, and let's welcome them, and you'd be there, and you'd talk to people, size them up, and we'd like start taking bets on who would
Who'd we go first?
who would go first. And that was interesting to have. There's 120 people working at the Grove. The other thing that was really great about Apple at the time, I talked to someone at the Apple Store the other day when I was in New York City. They don't do this. You would get in on the morning shift, and they'd go through all the financials for the store. Every day they'd be like, okay, we sold this. We sold. We did $120,000 yesterday. Our third party attach rate was below 20%. We need to sell more iPods and more Apple Care, and we need to sell, and they were incredibly transparent. And also, it was a great organization because I I've never had any problems being aggressive. And you'd have ideas, and I just like, oh, Ron Johnson, he's the guy who runs retail. Hey, Ron, this Chip, I'm at the Grove. I have this idea. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. Adding the marketing team, and then like that would be implemented store wide. So that was cool. It was
That
cool to
is
see.
cool. I tell you, I just realized. I mean, I mean, aside from just working in retail, you were really getting involved in the organization. I mean, having Apple and Amazon on your resume, not too shabby there, Chip. Not too
You know,
shabby.
it's not intentional. Neither of those were intentional. Probably.
Well, let's do. I want to make sure we keep the narrative here. So you're at Apple, and at
Uh-huh.
some point you decide the siren song of comics is calling you. Does so? Tell me about working for Ross, because right about this time is when I remember meeting Ross for the first
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and probably met you for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what was funny? So Ross had a partner, Andy Cosby, for a production company they had called Critical Mass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ross was like a script reader, mostly in the late '90s. He was doing script coverage and stuff. And then they were like producing stuff, right? And so there wasn't a lot of people shopping projects, comic book projects around Hollywood in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. But so it was Joe and me and Ross and Andy. And there were only so many slots that were getting, because it was like, oh, I have my one comic book property. And so it was funny because we had like butted heads with Joe, and I had butted heads with Andy and Ross a couple of times on some projects. And then one of the guys working at the Apple Store, this guy Nye Wright, had done this book for Image called Lex Talionis. And I mean, I just one of the geniuses at the Apple Store worked with like started Loot Crate, and I mean, the other Matt Myra was a genius at the Apple Store, the Grove, and now he's on like Talking Trek, and a comedian, and so yeah, it was a lot of artistically inclined folks were at the at the Grove, who are, everyone in LA is trying to do something else.
Right.
Um, but and the you know just the guy, the helicopter pilot that talks to Scotty in Star Trek 4, was one of the Apple geniuses.
The one,
Uh,
the one that picks up the whales.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah.
he was like, yeah, I don't act anymore. I just want to help people out with their computers. It's like, great. Um, LA is weird like that. So yeah, Nye, I wrote a little spy thing. Nye drew a mini comic, you know. So I had a mini comic. We went to San Diego, Nye went on to other things, but Ross liked the story, and so Ross wanted to publish it at Boom, and so then he got Francesco Francavilla to draw it. I had originally written the thing out as this really kind of crazy cinematic, like 400-page graphic novel. Then I had to like cut it down to like 5 22-page issues or whatever. And so it was Ross and his Andy Cosby's nephew Gianluca were basically like, you know Boom was basically a two-man operation, and so they decided to do Left on Mission, and so they just had no marketing. And the whole time I was doing the movie stuff, doing the film and TV stuff for Oni, I was like, oh, I got this marketing idea. And I've always been a marketing and sales guy. Marketing, sales, PR is like just falling off a log for me. Not a skill set, not a skill. It's come so easy to me. It's just not a skill set I ever valued.
Right.
Um, and and like when I was at Adhesive, I'd write the press releases, for Shannon stuff and help him promote his books, and you know, and I mean my first like sales, like how I really fell in love with like sales is I used to read Comics Value Monthly, right? Which was the
Mm-hmm.
monthly. It was a revolutionized great, pricing in the 80s. And I was at Phoenix. This is
No
how I got.
longer are you waiting for the Overstreet once a year.
No, you
Once a
got
month.
values monthly.
Monthly.
Monthly. It was amazing. And so I was at this is how I got the job at Phoenix, and like I just fell in love with selling stuff. Is I'm just like sitting there wasting time, my home, what's the Breakfast Club life? My home life was not satisfactory or satisfying. Um, I just spent the whole, it's just like had parents drop me off at the comic shop at 10. They'd come and pick me up at 4 or 5. I'm sorry, Herb, if you're out there. I'm sorry, Steve Riley.
Remember
Sorry,
those? Remember those kids?
Ken at the other comic shop. I'm sorry. I'd be there from 10 to 4, and I was obnoxious. Um, and so Cecilia, not sorry because I sold a lot of comics for you. And so I was just digging through the back issue bin, and I found all like the first Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, right? It just popped from $1 to 10, Comics Value Monthly, and she had like 10 of them for $1 a piece. I was like, Cecilia, give me the price gun. She's like, oh, okay. And I took the comics, and I was like, oh, $10. And then I was like, let's put them by the counter and see what happens. And then like an hour later,
Gone.
they'd all gone. And she was like, do you want to work here? And I was like, sure. I'm 14, sure. Do you want to work for trade? Sure.
No,
That's
of
legal.
course. That sounds awesome.
It's illegal in Texas. So I always liked selling stuff and marketing stuff, and so I was like, okay, Ross, give me the phone numbers of the top 100 stores. I'm going to set up a video camera. I'm going to go do like time lapse of me calling the top 100 stores. So did that, put it out there. Um, someone bootlegged someone bootlegged the issue, and I found it on a torrent, and there was like a hair on the scanner. So I sent out a press release. I was like, bootleggers, clean your scanners. I'm like, if you're gonna bootleg my book, at least, I was just looking for any angle to get,
Yeah.
get the
Any
press.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, conversation. And so then after a while, Ross was like, you wanna come work here? And I was like, and leave the Apple store? Uh so so yeah. So I gave
Well,
my notice at the Apple store 2 weeks before 2 weeks before the iPhone came out. My last day was the day after the iPhone came out. And the day after I gave my notice, um, Steve Jobs announced that he was giving iPhones to everyone that had been working at the Apple store for 2 years. And so everyone was like, dude, you gave your notice, you're hosed. Well, that hadn't gone through yet. So so the best part is, like, 2 weeks into working for Boom, they called me and like, you asshole, come and pick up your free iPhone. So then I was the jackass in San Diego in 2007 with the $800 iPhone.
oh, let me look that up for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I had all these marketing ideas, for comics. Oni was real content driven, and not, and those kind of like the post 97 to like 2005. I mean, they were doing black and white comics, buck 99, 2.99, and did like really great content that was like, yeah, kind of like not anything else that people were doing. Whiteout,
Hmm.
was super influential. I don't think Image Central would exist without Whiteout. Um, they got the clerks. I mean, Joe and Shrek had really great taste, and then Jamie came in, and they really didn't have to do a lot of marketing to sell those books. Those books, sold themselves, in the early days. So, but there were other books that could have sold better, I thought, with some marketing, and it wasn't really their core thing, operation. And they didn't want to listen to the guy who lived in L.A. because they're up in Portland,
Right.
and who in
Much
Portland?
cooler than you because I
Yeah,
live in Portland.
much
Yeah.
cooler. And so I had like 5 years of publishing knowledge from being around Oni, and then like a bunch of, you know, marketing ideas. And so I just came into Boom, July 2007. They weren't a top 20 comic publisher. Um, I was hired. I was hired at the same time Mark Waid was hired, so I came in and we announced Mark as the editor in chief at San Diego, and then
Wasn't there? I tried to look this up when we were talking about. Didn't you guys do a stunt when Mark came in as an EIC? Wasn't there something? It was black shirts with white text. I remember that. It was something like.
Mark Waid is evil. That was 2 years later.
Oh, okay, all right.
That
That
was
could
two
be.
years later.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That was that was probably my greatest my up until recently my greatest marketing coup in comics. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
So,
But
well,
no,
actually, go
was,
ahead and talk about that one because a part of what I like about this opportunity is to talk about campaigns and to talk about the actual mechanics of pulling something like that off.
yeah,
So, talk about Mark Waid is evil.
yeah. So, you know, uh, so the great thing about working at Boom is Ross hired me and he was like, I just want you to do your thing, like get off the chain and do what you're good at. And I'm like, great. And I had a bunch of digital background, right? And so I came in and there was a stack. Cody DeMattis said, JM DeMattis's son was there for a half second, working. and just everyone was doing too much, and there was just this huge stack of review copies that had just never gotten to the post office. And I was like, guys, like PDFs, like what, and
Simple.
they're like, I was like, Ross, do you care? Like, no one's doing this because piracy. I mean, it's all getting pirated. And he was like, I don't care. And so the only person at the time that was sending out PDF review copies was Philip Savlik at Top Cow, and he was sending them out at You Send It. And I was like, oh, I gotta, I'll get to Mark Waid as Evil later. This is my first big success at Boom that always comes to mind. And so I got a blog install, a WordPress install, and I made the Boom, and I got boom-press.com, and I made this password protected blog, and I sent an email to all my press contacts, and I was like, hey, you know, we're gonna put up PDF review copies. We're gonna leave them up, but for security reasons, I need your address and your phone number. So I immediately got this great database of not only like the people's names, but their addresses, phone numbers, so I could send them, holiday cards. But I could also like call them up, uh, which I realized I was talking to J.K. Parkin that was doing a blog at Newsarama back then, and I was I'm still like a phone guy. I'd rather get on the phone, rather talk to people than send an email. And I was talking to J.K. Parkin, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm just talking your ear off. I'm so sorry. I'll let you go. I'm sure you have other people to talk to. He's like, other people to talk to? You're the only person I talk to. And I was like, what? He's like, well, you and David Hyde from DC Comics are the only people that actually call me. And Blog at Newsarama was one of the biggest outlets. And then I was like, ding, 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 ding. And that's when I just started calling people in the press. But we never took, Sabbath was putting stuff out, You Send It links, and they would die after 14 days. And so on my Boom Press blog, we never took anything down. When I left in 2011, there were 8 gigs of compressed PDF, going back to July of 2007. Like you could go. So if a new issue came out, you could get all the early issues. If you're like on the
Right.
6th iteration Warhammer, you could go back. So if anyone, so we'd have like people review stuff that was like a couple months old sometimes because they needed to review something.
Or they
So
would review like the whole series because the final issue came out, right?
right,
That's
right.
kind of brilliant.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I tagged it stuff. I was super duper proud of that, and yeah. So Mark Waid is Evil. So Mark Waid, he'd like done some stuff at DC. Last thing he did at DC, I forgot what it was, but like the fans didn't take to it for whatever reason, and then he was being Mark online, and people were getting angry about something he said, and I think
That has never happened in the history of the internet. That's
and I
crazy.
think
People get mad
someone
at Mark Waid.
I think someone like wrote Mark Waid is evil somewhere or whatever. And so Mark had this comic that he was going to do for Boom, debut in April of 2009, and it was irredeemable, and it was basically Superman gone bad.
Right.
And so it's like, and Mark's like known for these like really heartfelt Silver Age, and especially the last, I think he did Brave and Bold. He did like a stint on Brave and Bold. It was like super heartfelt. I was like, how are we going to introduce people to this new superhero concept? And then Mark doing something like, like the Plutonian, the first 7 pages, like kills a family, like the kills children. It was really And so I was in the shower in the morning, and I was like, oh, Mark Waid is evil. Mark Waid is irredeemable. And I was like, that's pretty good. And I came in, and just the whole campaign just popped in my head. And I was like, Ross, here's the idea. And at the time, there's this site that Ryan North put together called Project Wonderful, and it was doing
Mm-hmm.
ads on comic book blogs and comic book uh, um, web comics and stuff, and like so you could get like you get a ton of ads in the comic book space, get a ton of visibility for a couple $100. And so it's like, Ross, so we're gonna do a site. It's gonna be markwaiteisevil.com. And you're gonna go to, and so we're gonna buy ads, and it says Mark Waite is evil. And you're gonna click the ads, and the ads go to markwaiteisevil.com. And markwaiteisevil.com is gonna say Mark Waite is evil. And that's it. We're gonna do that for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, when people are trying to figure out who is hating Mark, we're going to turn it around. We're going to put an animated GIF, Mark Waite is evil, Mark Waite is irredeemable. Here's the the diamond code and stuff, out in April. And Mark and Russ like, that's great. How much is that going to cost us? I was like, dude, $300. It's going to be awesome. It's like I like, this person would probably cringe if he was still around. My marketing Bible is Abby Hoffman's soon to be a major motion picture. Like he was like the king of doing like low tech cheap stunts that had huge impact. So like he'd go in Times Square and Abby Hoffman would beg for dollars, he'd like beg for bucks, and he'd get like $100, and then he'd go on the New York Stock Exchange and then drop the $100 bills and pause the New York Stock Exchange for 15 minutes and be on the front page of every newspaper of America. It's like took him a couple of hours to beg for the dollars, and then so it's like that's kind of my North Star for any like marketing stunt, right? Is not a capitalist person. Is Abby Hoffman. And so we did that, and so I kind of leaked it to a couple of people that, hey, we're doing this. And then people were like wondering who was doing it. And then I went into the code on the website and I commented in the code. I was like, no dice, bleeding cool. Or like line in the gutters. No dice, line in the gutters.
Right.
Super close, JK at blog at Newsarama, and then I go, hey, look at the source code on the website. And then then I get a whole nother
get a whole nother wave of people talking about it.
And then
fucking brilliant.
Back in the day, back then, you could actually send a press release and get it picked up by 300 blogs. Yeah. And the blogosphere, the comics, it was fantastic. And, I had like some really key blogs that would always cover Boom, and it was great. And then what was fantastic about the time is Boom wasn't in the top 10 like 6 months before this, when we were starting to do this. And I would go to ICV2 and Comic-Con, and we were putting out better and better stuff and more appealing stuff, and Farscape, stuff like that, and we'd be like number 14 this month, number 13, number 12, number 11. I'd tape that on the door every month. I'd tape it on the door, like here we come. And then 2008, the economy crashed, and all these publishers were like, oh, we're gonna pull back, and I'm like, well, we're doubling down. You can pull back, we're gonna double down. And it worked out. By the time Irredeemable came out, like the next month, Boom was the 6th largest comic book publisher in the direct market, and so that was super cool to be a part of. And the T-shirts that you're thinking of is Sent Diamond, 100 T-shirts. And
as I remember, I was in a retailer meeting where like you're in the middle of presenting, and you suddenly like people are handing out these T-shirts in the meeting.
That was the prove Bill wrong stuff.
Oh, that's right. Oh, damn it! You're right. This is the Bill Shanes thing.
Yeah, that was like that was the more insider baseball version.
That's right.
We sent 100 T-shirts to the top 100 accounts, and so these people would be like getting these Mark Waite is evil T-shirts at the same time the campaign's going on. They're like, "What's going on? Who hates Mark? Why do people hate Mark so much?" And of course, it's followed Mark forever. Uh, that was, that was such a
Yeah.
fun, such a fun time. Matt Gagnon, who later became editor in chief, when I started at Boom, he was the buyer at Meltdown. And go to Matt and be like, "Hey, man, am I doing this right?" I'm dealing with Diamond, and he would like school me on like the retailer perspective, and then and and this managing editor slot, he had done some editing, managing editor slot open up. I was like, Ross, Mark, you got to talk to this guy, Matt Gagnon. Matt's still editor in chief of Boom. We were at a holiday party, that year, and Matt and I met this college kid, Daphne Plebin, and she was like working at EW, crazy smart, had a podcast, and was like, oh, just we're gonna hire you. Brought her in. She's still at Boom doing. She was doing the Power Rangers for years, and then she was my assistant, my marketing assistant, Matt's editorial assistant. And then she left me to go to editorial. I
Oh.
told her, I was like, if you're gonna leave me, you got to find your replacement. And then her college friend Ivan Salazar, who
Oh.
had worked at the newspaper at UCLA
Yeah.
with her, came in, and so we were all in a room at Boom, the four of us, when the Irredeemable was happening. So I'd be remiss. It's like my best memories of Boom are like in the room with those three people, and it was like a little bit bigger than this desk.
It's a
And
great
then
crew.
I spoke at a class and met Devin Funches, pulled him in, and then
Hmm.
the other room that I remember is me, Devin, and Ivan, the marketing crew at Boom. So it's like 4 years, but it seemed like 10. It
Yeah.
seems like one in my memory, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, so much of what you were doing there was, a lot of it. I would say I've taken a lot of cues from what you guys were doing during that period in my career, but you're right. There was this like really vibrant uh, press and blogosphere and all of these people that online that were talking very seriously about comics, and it was easy to get. Not easy, but if you were at all creative and if you wanted to stunt, like you could get their attention,
Oh
and
yeah.
you could get conversation about it. Uh, Compare that to today, where I would say that vibrancy doesn't feel like it is there anymore. There are people chasing the algorithm that are doing, Marvel and DC YouTube channels, right? There are people that are, talking some on Twitter/X. They're talking some on, Reels, but for the most part, no one is really talking about the indie comic scene or the even anything but like the top two or three, right? So
Yeah.
you are in the middle of publishing now, and I want to get to that some, but like just to like kind of jump around. How are you thinking about that now? Because you're a stunter from way back. How do you process that now in this
It is
environment?
it is it is much harder. It is
Yeah,
much harder to do a successful stunt, you know. Um, I think that, one of the things we've done, I think, very successfully at Distillery is like really lean in to the drop culture that comics naturally are.
yeah,
And and I've tried to, the biggest, having great surprises uh is, leads to conversation. And so partnering with great creators, like we have at Distillery, and leads to, great comics, and announcing those great comics, when people least expect it, are, I think is one way to do it. I don't know if I have the answer, I think the blogosphere has like really been taken over by the YouTube, uh, but that YouTube culture, I find, I just don't have any time. I can read a couple blog posts. I
Yeah.
don't have time to, watch a 2 hour video review, and I've gotten on,
It's
some of these.
okay. No one's gonna watch this either. I mean, we're already
Right,
at an hour 20. I mean,
I
we're
know.
deep into the ain't nobody watching this.
Yeah, no one's watching this. It's super. Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Like, having 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 great content helps. I mean,
Yeah.
I think um, we had strong indie content when I first got to Boom, but it wasn't the kind of A-list content that we have at Distillery. And so, I think at Distillery, it's less stunty than, just how do we show off? How do we zig when other people are zagging? I think one of the most innovative things that we've done in the last 30 days, that's fun, was we ran a 12-page preview in Comic Shop News
Yeah.
over 3 weeks, which no one's done in 10 years. So it was like, oh my God,
Well,
why
I
is
do
this,
remember.
sort of digital adjacent company doing this, yeah, so it just starts a conversation. Of course, Brian Azzarello is going to make fun of me, like, why you put my book in this old thing? I thought you're going to do cool marketing, Mosher. I was like, trust me,
Yeah.
No.
Uh, I do though. I do remember another little upstart company that put a preview comic into an entire story, in fact, into Previews magazine. I don't know
Yes.
if you remember that, but
Yeah.
that was a little thing that somebody
I might have a girlfriend that has a box of those previews somewhere.
did. Yeah. Good for her. They're actually getting some money.
Social media, like trying to find the cool social media moments.
Yeah.
One of the people that, when I was at Comixology Originals, I was tracking the people that were reviewing comics and doing like cool stuff and had big followings. And Sade Page, who has a Instagram um, presence under What Page Is It,
Yeah.
was doing really fantastic social media moments and also reviews. And so we pulled her into Distillery very early, and she does. We're at a party, and she like gets glasses and draws Distillery on them, and then has everyone wear them, and then does a
Yeah.
cut, and it's very creator focused, and uh, and
I have
yeah,
to
it's
commend you on that hire because I think I met her. I don't know if I met her at your party, but it was at that year's San Diego, and immediately went, oh, we have to either get her like sponsor her or something, and then like before I could even work it out, she was working with
yeah.
you, so yeah, good
Yeah,
call.
no, and then there's a whole group of influencers who like reviewing comics that on social media. So it feels less stunty, less stunty, these days. With kind of quality content we have, you know, and and the established names. I'm sure I'll do some stunts here and there.
I'm
When
sure
the
you will. I have no
when the
doubt.
when the, when the mood strikes.
Well, I do want to. I know that there's. So you have after you left Boom,
Mhm.
you had a pretty substantial move, right?
Right.
In that you joined Comixology when it was Comixology, and
Yep.
I just want to go through this list of titles real quick because I think this is super informative about how you became more and more involved in that. Uh,
Please God. Oh,
we
oh.
started off as VP of PR, Marketing, and Business Development.
The,
Then Senior Director.
that's the most catch all title.
Basically, yeah. This is a
Yeah.
VP of bullshit.
Yep.
Then the Senior Director of Communications.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
I couldn't,
VP
I,
of Communications.
I couldn't be for more corporate reasons than I care to go into. I
Yeah.
couldn't retain my VP title once Amazon bought Comixology.
Understood.
Yep.
All right. Then VP of Communications again. Then VP of Communications and Marketing. This is all before the acquisition.
The senior director was after the VP stuff, but that's good.
Okay. Then post Amazon, head of content for Comixology. Head of content. That is the most marketing bullshit title I've ever heard. And you oversaw Comixology Originals, where I believe you single-handedly funded every indie convention on the calendar. If I'm with Amazon's money, I think that might be the legacy of Chip Mosher right there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I want to say, I think my favorite little factoid about your time during that period was, what was your email address when you were an Amazon employee?
Chip@amazon.com.
That is the most baller thing I have ever heard. Chip@amazon.com. What, are you like a founder? Were you and Bezos hanging out in his garage? So now you're Chip at Amazon?
That the story behind that is basically the the keystone of my Amazon experience. So my real name is Lawrence, spelled Laurance.
That's a good Southern name.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's named after my great grandmother Laura. And so you're born in Texas and you're not a girl, which they wanted, and so you're a boy. So you're not Laura, you're Laura Ince. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm the third, so that was actually my grandfather that was the first Lawrence, and the third I chip off the old block. So that's what
yeah.
But enough of Texas stuff.
Before we leave that, one of my best friends growing up in Texas was a third. He was like Bruce the third, and he was Chip. So there you go.
Chips are either Charles or thirds.
Yeah.
And then Treys are thirds also. So my older brother is a third from my mom's first marriage, and he's Trey. So I couldn't be Trey. I had to be Chip.
I gotcha.
So we get bought by Amazon, and they sent out an email and like, here's your username for the HR portal, and the username's LAURAN. And I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine for the portal. And then they're like a week later, like, okay, and now it's tied to your email address. And so then my email address is Lauren, Lauren C or something. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to spend my whole time here explaining this name to everyone. And so I go to HR and I'm like, hey, like, this is like week 2 after the acquisition. Like, how do I get this changed? And they're like, oh, you need to call this number right now and talk to IT, because it's populating across all our myriad servers, and and it might be too late. I'm like, okay, gosh. So I get the number and I call. I'm talking to this real nice guy in IT, and he's like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine. We can change it. Just don't ask for your first name, because you won't get it. And so my dad was a lawyer, like I said. And so I didn't hear can't, I heard don't. Right. And I was like, so don't, because I won't get it. And he was like, yeah, we have 250,000 employees. You won't get, oh, you got it. I just put it in. You got it. Look at that. And he was like, the last chip must have just quit or something. Holy cow. And I was like, okay. And then like every week at Amazon's, it was like, yeah, we don't do that here. And I was like, yeah, don't, I don't.
Don't doesn't mean can't.
Don't doesn't mean can't. And so, I mean, there's at a big company like that, there's a lot of people that are really invested in overdoing policy and procedure in a way to feel powerful and big about themselves. And those are people that I have the most problem with, and that I would steamroll over with joy.
I can see, having spent so much time. I mean, you had that time at Apple, but having spent so much time in comics, where it's, the org chart is two levels, right? We're not nobody in comics is like, you know, got 80 direct reports. Like we're all just like, one or two ways away from the CEO. I can imagine that, going into an organization like Amazon, that's got to be cultural shock for everybody, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Apple was very corporate in a lot of ways, and like the things like the hiring, having a good feel for people in the hiring, and and that process, and and I somehow I really took a lot of that experience, and I think, one of the things I look back at my Boom experience is I'm super proud that, of the 10 plus people that I was involved in hiring or essential in the hiring, a lot of them are still there. A lot, and have done incredibly well. And
Or have moved on to other jobs in like Devin over at Diamond, right?
doing
Yeah.
great over Diamond Books. And so, having that Apple experience really served me well at the startup. When I got to Comixology, I was employee number 35. By the end of the year, Comixology was like a rocket ride. By the end of the year, they were at like 75 people. I remember I had an office in LA and had come to the Comixology office in New York. And I was like, I remember the day that I got there, and I was like, yeah, this is the point where I'm gonna stop knowing everyone's name. I can't, it was getting too
Not even
big.
gonna try.
And I think we had 110 people when we got bought
Yeah.
by Amazon. Um,
I
but
remember those days well because we were a Comixology at Valiant. We were a
yeah,
Comixology account, and so we would, because we were also in Manhattan, we would just go down. We'd walk to the office for meetings occasionally, and it changed so rapidly from meeting to meeting, like it was
oh
a
yeah,
whole different buildings. Yeah.
it was astounding. I mean, and it was really wild for me because I would I'd go like 6, 8 weeks between my trips to New York, and it was like, oh wow, what company is this? But yeah, it was a fantastic experience. It was fantastic. You know, uh, yeah, it was great.
So why'd you leave Amazon
Why,
eventually? Yeah.
why did I leave? It was time. That they did this. They did a huge hiring. Um, they did a big hiring kick over quarantine, over COVID, and so things. They hired a bunch of people that the thing that I really liked about Amazon is, at a big company like that, you're always going to have like the policy and procedure, people that are trying to, you know, weaponize that to feel big about themselves. So always going to have that. But at Amazon, which was incredibly great, was they were known as, and they're known in the tech world as being super nimble, super fast, less red tape, non-bureaucratic. And so take take Comixology Unlimited, right? So someone wrote the proposal got accepted, we were to market in 6 months,
Yeah.
which is just astounding for the kind of complications and for a Fortune 5 corporate America type company. And then you have Comixology Originals, like you know uh we wrote the proposal. It's mostly Ivan and I with Steinberger's influence and notes, and we had like 3 meetings, and then it was greenlit, and we were going. And so it took like from the time we decided to do Comixology Originals to start, it was like 6 weeks. It was great. And so over quarantine, you had a bunch of people hired, and you get there and you get told like, hey, this is the corporate culture. We get shit done. We have they have these tenets, these leadership principles. Bias for action is like one of the top ones. And as culty as like leadership principles sound, you know, it gives you two things. It gives you a way to talk about work in a common language across a lot of different divisions, which is fantastic. And then, but it also gives you something to like point to and say like, hey, this is our number one leadership principle, and so we are not doing this, and so we need to change and get this shit done. And so that was really great. And then they hired all these people. They had not gone to the offices. They had not interacted with anyone at work, and they were just behind their screens, and stuff came to a crawl.
Mm.
And then Steinberger, who I'd given David a letter of intent for Comixology to raise their second round while I was at Boom, and we became pals through that. And then you know uh uh people don't remember at the time in like 2011 that there were a bunch of other digital comic platforms,
Sure
and
were.
especially in the PR space, Comixology was not getting the love it deserved. And so initially I was brought in to fix that, and to fix that story. And because Comixology, when I was at Boom, I did deals with Comixology, Panelfly,
Iverse.
Discount Comic Book Service had their own
Yeah,
like
I remember that.
a long box we never launched, a Comics Plus and Graphically. So I done business. I did deals with all of them, and so I got the quarterly checks, and you know I got the one. They're all like one. Like the Comixology check. Let me just put it this way: Comixology check was 10x
Anybody
the
else?
anybody else. And I
Yeah.
and I called up David, and I was like, hey, I can't tell you that you're 10x at everybody else, but I'm just saying, like, there's no way your PR should be like any of these people should be getting any kind of press. And so we worked on fixing that and stuff. And so Dave and I had spent a long time together, working together in the trenches through the growth of Comixology from 2011 through the Amazon acquisition, which was from a PR as a PR professional was a fantastic day launching that,
I
uh,
bet.
doing the press. We were in a locked room, rolling calls with all the press all day. It was fantastic. And then David got an internal offer to move on, and I knew he was moving on, and I was like, well, that's it for me. Because part of the joy of working at Comixology is working with David, and so then started noodling on a business plan, and then David's the job that they gave him was what I started hating working there. It was super bureaucratic. So he's like, dude, let's start a new business, and I was like, here is my latest draft of the business plan. And he was like, oh, he's like, this is good. This is good. I want to do this, and then we're gone. Like 2 weeks later, we were off to the races. So yeah, it was great.
I
And
so there's a moment in when I talked to about Jen's in Jen's interview where I was saying this is San Diego 2 years ago, something like that, maybe two, yeah, two, where we're sitting out on Wednesday, we're sitting at that Lou and Mickey's on that the patio, and everybody's just caught walking by, and we see you and David walking by, and we walk up, and you're being friendly but a little cagey, And I'm like, okay. They left, and we turned to the people we were with, like, there's something up with those two. They're launching something. And then later at a party, I think it was our party, I see you and Jen, and just like, it's at the same table, and like, just something like, there's something up with those two too. What is up with Chip? He's just like, he's got something going on with everybody, and nobody's talking about nothing.
So on the DL.
Well, let's talk about a distillery, and I didn't really want to.
Yeah, I tried to convince David to do shirts that said "Don't ask" on the front about our new venture. And he was like, I was like, okay. David's great because
He dials you in. He pulls you back.
He dials me back to a more palatable level.
Is that why the lack of stunts? Now, granted, you're right. Quality, really great quality stuff can. You don't really need the stunting anymore. Stunting is still fun when you have quality stuff to sell.
Yeah.
But I wonder, is David what's suppressing that in you? Does the jester want to come out, Chip?
No.
All right.
David's got a lot of gesture in him. People don't know it.
I like David. I like David quite a bit. I'm hoping to get him on the show at some point. Yeah, I find him to be fascinating.
He's so
I'd like to talk. If it feels like I was glossing over your time with Comixology and Amazon, there's a specific reason, because I know that we cannot talk all night, and I want to talk about distillery.
It's 11 years, my Comixology.
I know. And you did great work. Like I said, I think there was a moment there where the fact that you were funneling so much Amazon money into the small and indie press was incredible.
But that was a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy.
On to take over in press. Didn't you read?
Oh, that's right. I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, that was one of the things I was probably most proud of. And one of the things that made me the most sad was, there was zero ulterior motive. It was mostly David and I and some of the other execs, with some extra budget and wanting to do good.
Yeah.
And then, some people, who did not like Amazon, and, they certainly, I'm not going to get into that. I think
there's no need. Yeah.
There's reasons why people don't like Amazon. They ran us out of all those shows.
I will say that I think one of the underappreciated legs on the comics industry table, right, is that the role of the investor, is the role of the bank, right? And I think that there's one of the things that is continually, unless you understand it from this level, you never really see how much we need that sector to be happy and interested and engaged, right? We need them to see us as viable, as exciting, as something that moves culture. We need all of that because that money funnels down to everyone, right down to Artist Alley, right down to those indie one booth, one man, one comic show. That he is a beneficiary of those investors. And I don't want to sound like a capitalist rah-rah, but it really is needed. Otherwise, this whole thing is being held up by whatever our disposable income is at any given time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we had a great run at Comixology sponsoring SPX. We were the first corporate sponsors of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. Worked with Tom Spurgeon on that. TCAF, Thought Bubble, of course, which was fantastic. And I think the thing that really upset me about that, and especially about when we lost the sponsorship at SBX, was that the group that was organized to do that, with the energy with all the energy that they that it took to do that, it just took a little bit more energy to do a GoFundMe and
Yeah.
to raise the money that could have replaced it. But no, like we Comixology got kicked out of SBX, and then they went to Kickstarter. And Kickstarter had that blockchain thing, and then Kickstarter got kicked out of SBX. And
Yeah.
it's, where do you go if if you're gonna have if as a community you're going to decide to have that kind of purity test on the sponsorship, then you need to find that money doesn't exist magically.
Correct.
And I think the main leaders of that group were incredibly naive, and I think you know, weirdly selfish, and that they could have easily used their voices to. I think the SBX sponsorship was like 10 grand. You know, could have raised that money from the community in a
Sure.
in a but it went from like kicking out the corporate sponsors and then saying we want to then there was like a demand letter sent to SBX, like we want to say and who your next sponsor is, and we need to know. And it's like, well, then you be the sponsor. If you want that kind of control, then raise the money. And like, you've seen the GoFundMe's. The comics community is super giving. Like
Absolutely.
it really just seemed very performative in a lot of ways. Without it's the one thing I really dislike is performative actions like that don't lead to anything concrete.
If you are unwilling to help find the answer, maybe stop demanding that the question be
Right.
raised. Right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a very valid point taken. All right. So we've talked about your long and storied career,
Yeah.
and the fact that live and breathe comics. So you did this cagey thing in San Diego 2 years ago, and then suddenly we're in the age of distillery. Now,
Yes.
I will say that. So, just at the time, I was very much like a living and breathing Bad Idea, and so much of what we did, you Bad Idea and Distillery were kind of dipping from the same pool, and I think that one of the things that I found most remarkable was I literally, as we're getting this, I'm doing this conversation, I got a text from a brand called Mischief. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a brand that we took a lot of inspiration from. And I wonder, a brand with no vowels in their name and all capital letters that is doing basically the same kind of drop culture stuff, that's not an inspiration at all for a distillery, right? I mean, is that I love those guys. I
We
really
love,
do. I bought several things that they've dropped over the years.
yeah, I love Mission. They're great. They're great.
They're incredible. Um, so you start up a distillery with David. How has this been different? How has this experience been different from, the other startups? I mean, you were in at Boom fairly early. You were involved with Oni very early. Comixology, right? How is this like? What is distinctive about this for you?
Well, I'm,
Aside from you being so old that it
yeah.
feels.
Uh, you know,
We're the
well,
same age, by the way. I get to say that shit because I think we're about
well,
the same age. Yeah.
I had a couple of, I started a couple of businesses in the 90s out of college that, went nowhere. Um, but, and that always like kind of informed my life as an employee, because
Mm-hmm.
I had done payroll, and I had, been late on bills, and all that jazz. And so I never, I never I never came to a job and was like, oh, they're just paying me. It's just not my
Right.
it's not my DNA. I mean, when I was at the Apple store, you know, I I was just I was fixing the racks of the product and cleaning everything and making everything right, and then they had trained this whole team to do RAM installs, and I went back there, and these guys were like about to break the laptops because they were like unscrewing the wrong thing. And I went to the manager. I was like, "Can you just let me do the RAM installs today?" Like, I'm just like, it's freaking me out. It's really they're about to ruin like there's like three $5,000 laptops that are about to be destroyed. Um, and so then the next day it's like, do you want to be the I got like a raise like the first week. I was at the Apple store.
All this goes back to you pricing out comics at $10 a piece, right?
Right.
You
Right.
know, all this goes back. Yeah.
It all goes back to that. And so now, now I'm again co-owning a business, responsible for people, and uh, yeah, so it's different, having to, there's a great big safety net at Amazon, um, where you can fail at stuff, and they love failure at Amazon, and testing, learning stuff, and moving on, and so in this, that kind of, a big failure is not really an option. So yeah, it's a whole different ball game, but it's been the best. I'm just, I love I love what I do. We our aim was to do something very different in the direct market. Uh, I think Bad Idea, is probably the closest thing to what we're doing, though we were sort of less outside the system
Right.
than what you guys were doing. I have a lot of respect for what you, Hunter, and Dinesh started there. Um, and don't get me started like talking about Oni not being a marketing driven company. It's funny to see Hunter there and
I know.
turning Oni into like just turning the marketing knobs on, and just, yeah, he's doing a fantastic job. I could call him up. It's like, anytime you want to know where the bodies are buried, let me know. But yeah, yeah, it's great. I've been able to become close with a lot of like fantastic comic creators whose work I love and respect, and
Well, let's dig into that list. So just the pulling from the press release, we've got Brian Azzarello, Scott Snyder, James Tinian the fourth, Ram V, and artists like Mirka Andolfo, Lee Garbett, Jock, Tula Lotte, Jamie McKelvin. I mean, the list. This is a deep Murderers Row bench, right? That's not even, that's not even talking about everybody who came in after. Yeah. It's impressive. So talk to me about how you drew these people in. So, it's a brand new startup, right? And so typically very difficult to get big name creators in. And you did. You came in really strong. What sort of, I don't know, want to talk about the deal points, but like if we're really digging in, like how did you structure the company that would allow that to happen?
So let me tell you a story.
Okay.
So early on, San Diego, I'm running around. I'm working for a company, 94, that was doing digital comics. It's a totally different direction. But a fun story, nonetheless. were doing like putting comics on the web in like 3 megabytes that would take an hour to download. But I was signing up a bunch of indie guys to do comics, and so I met this guy Ed Brubaker. He was hanging out with Jason Lutz and Megan Kelso and that whole group back in '94. So I've known Ed since his indie comic days.
Yeah.
We're not like tight pals or anything, but we know each other. Um,
I
and
remember meeting Ed in an ape right around
yeah,
94,
yeah.
95.
I
Yeah.
went to the first ape. Went to the
Yeah.
first ape. It was great.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great show. I missed that
yeah,
show.
it was a great show. And so we did a multi-year exclusive deal at Comixology with Marvel, and right after that, Winter Soldier's premiering at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles. And so I get in line, David's there, and so we're at the Winter Soldier premiere, and lo and behold, Ed Brubaker's right in front of us. And so we're waiting in the line and we're talking to Ed. So exciting that that he created this character at Marvel, Winter Soldier, and it's like the heart and soul of this movie. It's super cool. He's super excited. We're super excited to be there. It's so great to see Ed and success, and you know and we're getting up to the desk where if you're like the copy boy at Disney, you get sent to the Grauman's, the overflow theater where, so you get to be at the premiere, but you're not at the premiere, and then there's the other line where and you're walking
Yeah.
the red carpet and you're, walking behind Jeremy Renner and Scarlett Johansson and all that going in to the theater where all the stars are. And so we get up there, Ed's in front of us, and Ed gets pointed to the overflow theater, and David and I get pointed to the El Capitan.
Ooh.
And that was probably probably one of the most horrible, like, yeah, I mean, it's just horrible. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible to see Ed treated in such a way. It was horrible to be there. It was horrible to see his facial expressions. Like, here were two guys. We'd done a business deal with Marvel, and we were getting treated better than the creator. And so that was kind of David and I's North Star when we talked about distillery. We wanted to come out the gate with a core group of creators who owned the company with us, had equity in the company, and that would not be treated the way Ed was treated in that instance. And obviously, we were able to figure out a deal that a lot of great creators who I love and respect, you know, liked. And so, it's been great. So we, on the one side, we have the founding creators who all have some equity in distillery with us, and then on the other side, we actually have a pool of equity that everyone who is working on the books the first 3 years that is participating in. So really, the creators are and will be owners of the company, and I think that's kind of the ethos of of how we look at everything.
That's wonderful. I love that.
And I think the product, it's like the end result. It's like when you're doing comics and you're taking, you do it work for hire and you own the IP in perpetuity. You're not going to get anyone's best work. And
No,
so,
I mean,
we're-
having worked with companies that do exclusively work for hire, you are always like, am I getting your best, or are you saving your best for your creator owned? That's
yeah.
very
Yeah,
common.
Yeah, and so I think we're we're getting people's best, and and also doing crazy stuff. Somna with Becky Cloonan and Tul Otay is I just don't know anyone else that would have done that book. I
Yeah.
mean, it's incredible. Having Jock write and draw his first I mean, he wrote draw Batman, but nothing, nothing, you know out of whole cloth, and
Right.
that's exciting. And then we have a Western by Azzarello and Riso, which Westerns are always risky until they do well.
That's right. No, nobody wants westerns until somebody wants a western.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll never forget the height of Buffy uh, doing well, and everyone everyone loving Buffy and shopping stuff around Hollywood, and it's like, oh, it's a female lead. No one wants a female lead. And you're like, what about Buffy? Oh, that's an outlier. Okay, you know.
Yeah.
So,
So our intrepid researcher, a guy named Anthony Militano, you
uh-oh.
actually may have met Anthony at some point when he worked at Maximum Comics.
Okay.
I've been working with Anthony for a few years. He loves this part, and he gives me this like dossier on the people that we're talking to. He actually wrote up a few questions for you, and I think they're pretty good. So I'm just going to read them as they are. When you're talking about getting a product in front of people in this day and age, as opposed to like the decades we've been doing this for a while, um, what what tips can you provide for publishers trying to get their product in front of people? Are you going to consumers first? Are you hitting retailers first? Are you hitting them at the same time? How do you think about that like messaging ladder now? Am I stumping you? We can blame
No,
it on Anthony.
no, I think that's for comic books are odd in the sense that your first consumer for single issue comic books is the retailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're selling to them, and then they're selling to the end consumer. And so you're having to drive demand that's not going directly to you, and then show that demand, and the quality product to the retailer, who's usually also a fan. Uh, and so, I mean, we're hitting them all at the same time.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's talk a minute about format. You guys have made, you came in saying you're going to talk about a digital in a market that is tough to sell digital. Honestly, because Amazon seemingly has killed digital sales almost completely. And I mean, I don't know if that's a bold statement, if you would agree with that, but I feel like, I think at this point we can say that Amazon really just kind of fucked digital sales. You guys have decided to really start, producing your own and pushing that out. You also did format. You created these treasury sized books, right? You're doing really high quality paper, treasury sized books with a higher price point. Talk about what the decisions were going into that, and do you feel like now you made the right decisions early? Are you sticking by them? Like, what lessons have you learned there?
How many questions is that?
That's a
That's like,
lot of questions. I just want to give you a bunch that you could chip away at. Chip away at.
um, you know, I was working on a magazine-sized format personal project for myself that I kickstarted,
Mm-hmm.
um, and
Blacking
was
out.
blacking out. Yeah, and I when the it's my once every decade comic book writing blacking out that I did with Peter Krause, the Kickstarter sensation of 2020, but also known as "What Did You Do Over Your Quarantine?" Uh, I think we raised like 55 grand on it. It's been published in France, Italy, and will be coming out from Dark Horse Comics this October.
Nice.
Um, uh, because yeah, it's nice not to have to publish your own stuff. Um, so yeah, I was working on that, and and with Peter, and then I was in this meeting with meeting at DC, and they pitched us out the Black Label magazine size perfect bound editions, and I was like, oh man, they're gonna do this before my book comes out. I really, this is the format. I mean, there's, the decision making there has been, you know, comics have been this comes out of this disposable, you know, arena. It's a collectible that was not meant to be a collectible, right? And so
Right.
so it's like, how do we make an art object? How do we make something that is worth the price point that people are now having to pay for these, and have it something substantial, something beautiful, and something really satisfying to read. And I don't think your regular 4.99 22 pages of content comic is on what in the publishing parlance is called self cover
Right.
is the answer. And so our answer is the 8.99 magazine size 45 plus pages of content, perfect bound spot gloss wraparound cover. And yeah, have absolutely no regrets about focusing on that. And when we came out, we got some negativity from fans and retailers, and then after publishing for 6 months, now it's like, when are you going to do a distillery design magazine size box? Where's my special distillery label for my CGC magazine? Where's my
I'm so surprised you don't already have those ready. I mean, they should.
distillery branded bag? Where's my
Uh,
distillery? Where's my, it's like,
the
oh,
Chip Mosher special would have been that out of the box, right? It would have been there like a, it would have
yeah,
been.
you gotta take baby steps. So yeah, no, I'm super, I think one of the we wanted something for a you know all the creators we talked to were just like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to make stuff in that size. I have really special ideas for that size. This is, I want to do stories in the size that I can't tell in any other format. So the creators, it was one of the things that really sold them on it. The artists love working in that size. They love the reproduction of the art. They love being on good paper. So it was great for the creators, which is something, was a core, one of our core things at Distillery, servicing the creators. And then for the customers, giving them something that feels, like an art object that feels, it's a collectible right off the bat, that is also has, you know, the amount of reading content in there that really makes it makes it work for that price point. And then for the retailer, they can buy 10, $4 comics at $2 a pop or whatever, and spend 15 minutes selling one and making $2, or they can spend 15 minutes selling ours and making $4.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just it, it's it's a it's just a better value for everyone.
Yeah. I believe me, I love the format personally. I think it's I would love to see it, and I love seeing you guys out there swinging, because at some point I want to start creating books in that format.
Yeah, and just going back to the stunts, right? You know, doing that format, I knew it would be controversial. I knew people would be talking about it, and there's no such thing as bad press.
Right.
So, on a certain level, it's like, It's like there was so much conversation for so long about the format. It really, I was like, great. Please keep talking about distillery.
I don't know anything about that. I've never heard about
Right,
getting people riled
right,
up in a publishing company.
right.
That's crazy. I never.
But
And
also, but also, then they're talking about the content. People are talking about, Gone. They're talking about Somna. They're talking about Blasphemous. They're
right.
talking about the content. Spectrograph, Blood Brothers Mother, White Boat. Bam,
Don't
bam,
miss one.
bam.
Don't miss
Yeah,
one.
I didn't miss any that are solicited. Calvin
Awesome.
Colon and Joe Henderson and Lee Garbutt's Big Burn.
All right.
Big
We have
soon
been going for like
near
3 hours now. I do want to I have one idea. As I'm hearing you talk, and I've never had this opportunity, and this has been wonderful, and I cannot thank you enough. I've learned so much, and I've taken so many copious notes of stuff that I'm going to call you up next week, and we're going to talk about. But I was noticing as we're talking that your career path, has been about the people that you've collected, right? It's been about people that have collected you, and then you've collected. I've made a list as we're talking, and I'm hoping I'm just going to hit you rapid fire with some names, pretty much in the order that you mentioned them. And I just want to get like one quick beat, something you learned from them, big impression, what you think nobody knows. I don't know what exactly I'm looking for here. I'm just kind of playing around with this. We may end up cutting it out. Who knows? You want to try it with me?
Sure.
All right. Joe Nosemack.
Fearless.
Shannon Wheeler.
Funny.
Ross Ritchie.
Big personality.
Mark Wade.
Insightful.
Oh. David Steinberger.
Probably one of the most decent people I've ever met.
Jen Haynes. I just put that one in to get you in trouble. You can leave it off. Do you have anything you want to say? We have an audience. The people who have listened this long, it's got to be like 4 or 5 people. They're listening. Anything you want to leave them with? Is there one message?
Jen Haynes, my heart.
Yeah, I know. Where can people find you, Chip? If they want to hear your messages, your talking, the things you say.
I don't want anyone to find me. You found me, and I don't like it.
That's fair. I cannot thank you enough. I think that everyone should go immediately to their local comic shop and ask them to subscribe to everything that Distillery does.
We're at distillery.co. We have some special stuff on the website. We have our digital comics on the website with Somna 3 currently available. When are you putting this up?
That's a good question. We take our time getting it right, but so it'll probably be at least a few weeks before it goes up.
You should go to distillery.co. You should sign up for our newsletter, because then you will be the first to know about our next big drop, and we will have some big digital news coming soon.
Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.